March 3rd, 1943 Mid-Atlantic, 450 miles west of Ireland. The sea is absolute black, the kind that swallows horizon and sky alike. The barometer is steady, the air salt wet and metallic. From below the surface, a shadow rises U-333, a Type 7C boat under Kapitänleutnant Peter Kremer, claws through the swells. Hatches open with a hiss, humid air bursts out like the breath of a buried beast. Frische Luft. Someone mutters fresh air. After 12 hours on Tormed, even the stench of diesel feels like freedom. Kremer steps onto the bridge, collar up against the wind. He has hunted across these lanes since 1941 and lived to tell it, once rammed by a destroyer, once nearly blown apart. His men call him Ali Kramer. The lucky one. Tonight luck feels ordinary. The sea is calm, the clouds hide the moon. Perfect hunting weather. 2 diesel engines rumble to life. Coughing smoke. The chief engineer listens for the rhythm steady. The helmsman checks bearings. Convoy on 168, should be 80 miles northeast. Running for Liverpool, Kremer's radio operator, Krüger, climbs up with headphones slung around his neck, catching the faint static of Dönitz's headquarters in Lorient. Every transmission burns risk. Every night dive burns battery. Strategy is mathematics of survival. Below decks, the air grows thick again. Men sleep shoulder to shoulder beside torpedoes, breathing through sweat and oil. Condensation drips like rain from the bulkhead. One sailor scribbles in his diary by torchlight. We rule the ocean when the world sleeps. On the bridge, Lieutenant Hoffman smokes. The ember hidden behind his palm. Too quiet tonight. He says. Kremer only nods. Then, a tremor. Faint. Mechanical. Out of place, a distant hum that swells and fades. At first it seems imagination. The Atlantic often whispers tricks, but the sound returns. Rhythmic. Rising with each second. Aircraft Kremer snaps. Hoffman sweeps the binoculars. Nothing. The horizon is ink. The men strain their ears. The hum becomes a heartbeat, perhaps a Sunderland far off. Krüger offers, forcing a grin. Kremer doesn't smile. Keep your eyes open. A wave slaps the hull. The smell of fuel thickens. Somewhere above the cloud ceiling, a Wellington bomber of RAF Coastal Command is descending, its radar locked on a blip 8 miles wide. Inside its fuselage, the ASV Mk.III scope glows green. The operator calls out bearings. The pilot, Flight Lieutenant Ian Mk.III, eases throttle and drops to 50 feet. Beneath his left wing, a sealed cylinder waits the Leigh Light. Target 1/2 mile. The operator says, switching to visual. The bomber dips. Kremer's crew hears the roar, now unmistakable. Low. Closing fast. Flugzeug port side, Hoffman shouts. Kremer's instinct screams dive, but the order dies in his throat. Daylight erupts. A blinding white cone ignites the bridge, vapor turning the air to glass. The sea transforms into molten silver. Faces vanish behind raised arms. Every rivet, every droplet glitters in surreal clarity. The Leigh Light burns with 10 million candles power. An artificial sun swung down from the clouds. Alarm tauchen, dive Kremer bellows. The klaxon wails. Men tumble through the hatch. Diesel throttles scream as vents close. Depth charges splash 1, 2, 3 before the U-boat's nose can tilt. Seconds stretch. A sailor slips on the ladder. Another drags him down by the collar. The boat shudders. Heavy water hammering the conning tower. Then the first detonation. The blast slams through the hull like a giant's fist. Lights flicker. Gauges spin. Somewhere aft, a pipe bursts. Boiling spray sears skin. Another explosion follows. Closer. Flinging mugs, boots, and bodies. The noise is beyond thunder. Beyond reason. Above. The light snaps off. Darkness collapses like a curtain. Kremer grips the periscope housing. Knuckles white. The depth gauge needle quivers past 20 meters, 40, 50. Hold her, he yells. Trim the bow. The engineer shouts back. Aft ballast flooding. We're heavy. For seconds, endless seconds, no one breathes. Then the boat steadies. The pounding recedes. Only the ticking of condensation on metal remains. They survived. But every man knows the truth. Now the Atlantic is no longer their night. Somewhere above, that ghost of a light waits to strike again. Silent until it blinds. Kremer looks at his trembling hands. The skin filmed with oil. For the first time, he feels hunted. For months, U-boats had ruled the darkness. Tonight, the darkness changed sides. Winter 1942, the North Atlantic Corridor. The convoy lanes are littered with ghosts. Oil slicks stretch for miles, shining under the cold sun like the fingerprints of death. The smell of burned diesel and cork floats mixes with salt and despair. Merchant ships steam east in tight boxes of 10 and 12 columns, trailed by destroyers whose hulls still carry scars from the last fight. For almost 3 years, Dönitz's U-Bootwaffe has waged a silent, methodical siege. Their commander, Admiral Dönitz, once a submarine officer himself, has built his doctrine on precision mathematics and psychology, Rudel tactic. The Wolf Pack, a lone submarine stalks, calls in the others by radio, and together they strike at night, in darkness. The hunter is invisible, the victim blind. By early 1942, the results are catastrophic. The Allies lose nearly 700 ships in 1 year alone, over 6 million tons of cargo food for Britain. Oil for the RAF, ammunition for the desert armies. Every freighter that vanishes drags with it 20, 50, sometimes 100 lives. In London, Prime Minister Winston Churchill admits in private memoranda, "The only thing that ever really frightened me during the war was the U-boat peril." The Black Pit. The deadliest stretch lies in the middle of the Atlantic, the area out of reach of land-based patrol aircraft. Pilots call it the air gap. Sailors call it the Black Pit. Here, convoys are alone for 5 or 6 days, beyond radar and rescue. At night, the horizon burns with sudden fires as tankers explode, lighting the sky in orange pillars before fading back to silence. A survivor from the freighter Empire, Shackleton later recalled, "We saw the torpedoes wake too late. One moment the mess deck was quiet. The next it was red. The sea was full of men, burning. In these waters, the U-boats are kings. They surface in packs of a dozen, their commanders standing shoulder to shoulder on the bridges, watching their prey through binoculars. Orders crackle in the headphones, attack in line abreast. Fire independently. Each night ends with the same grim ritual radio reports to Lorient or Brest, coded by Enigma, listing new tonnage sunk. Dönitz pins the numbers on a wall map. Blue pins for convoys, red for kills. The red multiplies like blood cells under a microscope. Desperation in Coastal Command, back in Britain. RAF Coastal Command bears the impossible burden of defence. Their motto, constant endeavour, hides exhaustion and grief. Outdated aircraft, like the Bristol Beaufort and Whitley Patrol by day. But night renders them nearly useless. Pilots fly hours over open water, guided only by guesswork and compass. A navigator from No. 172 Squadron wrote in his logbook, "We see them on radar, lose them at the last mile, and drop bombs on empty water. They can see us, hear us, smell us, and we see nothing. Radar itself, the ASV Mk.II, works poorly near the surface. Waves scatter the signal. Echoes drown in static. When a pilot descends for attack, the radar screen turns blind at 1,000 yards, precisely when vision is also useless. The result: missed chances, dead crews, and convoys still dying. The turning of minds. Among those who refuse to accept defeat is Wing Commander Humphrey Leigh, a quiet officer with a mathematician's mind and an inventor's stubbornness. Working after hours, using scraps and borrowed wiring, he builds a new weapon, a giant 22-inch searchlight, electrically stabilized, capable of throwing 90 million candle power across the sea when combined with the upcoming ASV Mk.III centimetric radar, which uses magnetron technology to pierce the sea clutter. His device could guide a bomber to within a mile of a submarine, and then, in the final seconds, flood it with daylight. Leigh presents the idea to the Air Ministry. They laugh. A searchlight in the middle of the Atlantic nonsense. You'll only show them where you are. But Leigh persists. He persuades the commander of 172 Squadron to install the prototype on a Wellington Mk.III. The trial takes place off Hampshire in early 1942. At precisely 2:3:45, the radar operator reports a target. The pilot descends to 500 feet. The light is switched on. For 10 seconds, the ocean turns to liquid glass. The dummy submarine below is perfectly visible and perfectly doomed. The observers fall silent. One whispers, "The night just lost its shadow. The last good year for the wolves." By the end of 1942, Dönitz still believes victory is near. The Allies' shipping losses remain staggering. New U-boats slide off the slips at Kiel every week. Kremer and his comrades drink schnapps in the mess halls of Lorient. Celebrating the tonnage war, their logbooks read like hunting journals. Empire Del sunk. Liu. 700 tons. Glenpark crippled. They do not yet know that the device that blinded U-333 is multiplying in secret. In coastal airfields from Northern Ireland to Gibraltar, squadrons are fitting their Wellingtons and Sunderlands with radar sets whose glowing screens now see through fog, through night, through arrogance. For the first time, the hunters will have nowhere to hide, not even beneath the moonless Atlantic. The wolves still feast. But the shepherds have found fire. Spring 1943 RAF Thorney Island, Hampshire. Inside a drafty hangar, the smell of hot metal and oil mingles with sea air from the Solent. Technicians in overalls swarm around a Vickers Wellington Mk.III. Its bomb bay open like the belly of a beast. Suspended beneath the wing is the secret that will change the Atlantic War, a 22-inch carbon arc lamp encased in glass and aluminum. Wired to a generator humming like a hive. Wing Commander Humphrey Leigh, the device's namesake, stands nearby with arms folded, eyes narrowed. For months he has fought bureaucracy to bring this weapon to life. Tonight, as he watches engineers bolt the last clamps, he says, "Giedly, it isn't the brightness that matters. It's the timing." They call it the Leigh Light, and with the new ASV Mk.III radar, it is about to make the ocean itself betray its hunters. Trial by darkness. That night, the crew of No. 172 squadron taxis out under blackout. The weather is typical. English misery rain slanting, ceiling a few hundred feet. Inside the Wellington's cabin, the radar operator, Sergeant Doug Frey, stares at the cathode screen. A faint green echo crawls across the circle. Contact. Range 8 miles. He says, "The pilot, Flight Lieutenant Ian Mk.III, nods. Hold her steady. Let's see if your new toy works." They descend to 100 feet, flying blind over a black, heaving sea. The radar trace sharpens the invisible line between science and instinct. At 1 mile, the echo vanishes, the notorious blind spot that doomed so many hunts. "Now," Leigh whispers over the intercom. Frey flips the switch. The underwing lamp ignites with a white roar, cutting through rain and night. In that instant, the sea below becomes a polished mirror, and in the center of it, caught mid-turn, lies the shape of a U-boat, its crew frozen on the conning tower like statues in lightning. Mk.III dives to 50 feet. Depth charges away. The explosions arrive half a breath later, thudding through the aircraft's skin. When the light is switched off, only boiling foam remains. In the control room back at Thorney Island, observers listening on wireless cheer. The experiment has become a weapon. Within weeks, the Air Ministry that once dismissed Leigh's idea now demands 50 sets. By May, Coastal Command has orders for 200. The marriage of radar and light is complete. Dönitz's countermove. But in Lorient, Admiral Dönitz reads the reports with growing alarm. His trusted captains, veterans like Kremer and Hardegan, radio stories of sudden daylight attacks in the dead of night. The enemy appears from nowhere. One report says, and a blinding searchlight exposes us before we can dive. Dönitz suspects a new radar frequency. His scientists rush to develop countermeasures Metox, a crude radar warning receiver. Installed on the bridges of U-boats, it can detect Allied transmissions miles away, giving precious seconds to crash dive. For a few months, the device restores confidence. Kremer again surfaces under the stars, scanning the horizon with cautious pride. When the Metox antenna squeals, he dives. When it stays silent, he feels safe. But the Allies have already leapt ahead. The new ASV Mk.III operates at 10-centimeter wavelength, invisible to Metox. The Germans are listening for thunder while lightning strikes in silence. In June 1943, U-boat losses soar. In a single month, 41 submarines vanish into the Atlantic depths, more than one a day. Kremer himself narrowly escapes another Leigh Light attack near the Bay of Biscay. Surfacing later to find half his bridge shredded, he writes in his diary, "They see in darkness. We are the ones who are blind now." The human side of innovation at RAF Chivener. Pilot Flying Officer Johnny Walker returns from a sortie pale and shaking. His crew had illuminated a U-boat at such close range that they saw the captain's face, eyes wide, mouth open seconds before the bombs fell. It wasn't a target, he says afterward in the mess. It was a man around the bar. No one answers. The war of technology still demands human payment. Wing Commander Leigh visits squadrons quietly, reminding airmen that every U-boat destroyed saves hundreds of merchant sailors. It's the same mercy, he tells them. Only from higher altitude, fire in the Black Pit. By summer, the night Atlantic has changed complexion. Where once the wolf packs owned the dark, now the sky blooms with sudden white flares. The convoy's escorts report seeing bursts of light on the horizon followed by rolling thunder. Our angels are working. One destroyer, Captain radios, to command. German crews start calling the new enemy Höllenlicht, the hell light. To them it is not technology, but sorcery, invisible aircraft that turn midnight into noon. For every U-boat that survives, Tenzing, those who make it home find the pens at Brest, and Lorient eerily quiet, the walls echoing with absence. Dönitz orders all submarines to transit by day submerged and to surface only in moonlight, but even that refuge is dying. The Atlantic has ceased to be their ocean. In war, Invention feeds Invention. For every light, there will come a shadow, and Dönitz is already building it. Autumn 1943, Lorient submarine pens. Occupied France. The Atlantic smells of rust and defeat. The great U-boat bunkers that once rang with confidence now echo with silence and acetylene torches. In the dim light of the pens, mechanics weld armour patches onto scarred hulls. Salt dries in white scales across the conning towers like age itself. Admiral Dönitz walks along the concrete quay, cap pulled low, face grey from sleepless nights. He studies the chalkboard that lists the week's arrivals. Too many empty lines. Out of 20 boats sent to sea in August, only 7 have returned. The Atlantic has become transparent, he mutters. But Dönitz is not a man who yields easily. If the enemy can see through darkness, he says to his chief of staff, then we must learn to breathe under it. Birth of the Schnorchel. In German shipyards from Kiel to Bremen, engineers begin reviving an idea abandoned before the war, the Schnorchel, a retractable breathing mast that allows a submarine to run its diesel engines while submerged. The Dutch had invented it years earlier. But now desperation gives it urgency. The new mast, fitted with air intake and exhaust valves, rises like a thin periscope above the surface. It feeds oxygen to the diesels and clears exhaust gases while the boat stays 10 meters down, invisible to both radar and searchlight. In November 1943, U-264 becomes one of the first to test it in the Bay of Biscay. The crew calls it the Iron Lung. When the mast extends, the engines thrum alive underwater. The deck plates vibrating. Men listen to the hiss of air through steel, half exhilarated, half terrified. It works mostly. The valves stick. The boat occasionally sucks in seawater, dousing engines and choking men. But the principle holds. The U-boat no longer needs to surface at night. The sky can blaze. They will not be seen. The return of the invisible enemy. By early 1944, Allied crews notice the change. Patrols that once found targets nightly now fly over empty oceans. Radar screens show nothing but rain clutter. Reports come in submarines no longer surfacing to charge. Convoy losses reduced, but enemy location uncertain. In London, Coastal Command analysts puzzle over the silence. The enemy has gone to ground, or rather, beneath it. The brief supremacy of the Leigh Light begins to fade. Technicians scramble to adapt. They tune radar sets to catch the small cross-section of the Schnorchel mast, but at 10 centimeters wide, it barely reflects a blip. Pilots joke grimly that they're hunting knitting needles in a storm. At sea, U-boat captains regain fragments of confidence. Peter Kremer, commanding again in U-333, notes in his log, "The airmen no longer find us. We breathe quietly, unseen, yet the new concealment comes at a cost. Life submerged for weeks erodes nerves. Air grows foul. Crewmen faint. Tempers fray. The once proud hunters now live like ghosts underwater, trading sunlight for survival. The Allied counterstroke. The Allies answer not with light, but with listening. By late 1944, they deploy a network of high-frequency direction finding stations Huff-Duff across Britain, Iceland, and Newfoundland. Each radio transmission from a U-boat, even a few seconds long, can now be triangulated within minutes. When a submarine reports convoy sighting, 2 bearings cross on the map, and a hunter-killer group of destroyers moves to intercept. The sea war shifts again, from illumination to interception. Meanwhile, aircraft equipped with improved centimetric radar return to the skies. Even the narrow silhouette of a Schnorchel mast begins to betray itself as radar operators learn its signature. The advantage that Dönitz fought to reclaim dissolves as quickly as it formed. The dimming of the wolf packs. By spring 1945, fewer than a dozen operational U-boats remain in the North Atlantic. Allied convoys cross in near safety. The night skies are empty of flares, the sea of wreckage. In the final weeks of the war, Kremer orders U-333 scuttled in a fjord, refusing to surrender her to the enemy. She brought us home too many times to die in captivity. He tells his men. They flood the ballast tanks, open the seacocks, and step off onto the shore as their steel companion slides beneath the waves. In London, Coastal Command officers receive the last message from the Admiralty U-boat threat eliminated. Some cheer. Others simply exhale. The light has done its work. The hunters of the deep are finished. The war for the Atlantic is over, but its lessons will shape every ocean that follows. May 1945, Liverpool Docks, England. Rain drizzles over the cranes and grey hulls. Convoys that once crept across the Atlantic under blackout now glide into port unescorted. Their decks are stacked with crates marked Lend-Lease, USA. Dock workers cheer, waving to crews of merchantmen who have survived the unthinkable. For the first time in 6 years, the Atlantic breathes again. In the Admiralty's operations room, a clerk pins the last red marker on the vast wall map. The convoy routes once streaked with loss reports are now clean. A handwritten note under the chart reads, "End of the U-boat threat. May 8th, 1945. But victory, as always, comes with ghosts. The toll beneath the waves. In total, over 36,000 merchant sailors have died in the Battle of the Atlantic, more than the entire strength of the Royal Navy at the war's start. Nearly 30,000 German submariners never returned. A casualty rate of 75%, the highest of any branch in any nation. For every U-boat that sank a freighter, the sea eventually claimed another U-boat. The Atlantic floor became a graveyard of iron, stretching from Newfoundland to Biscay. Flying Officer Doug Frey, the radar operator who once threw the switch on the first operational Leigh Light, visits a small memorial at Thorney Island. He reads the names of lost comrades from No. 172 Squadron carved into the stone. "We fought in darkness," he says softly, but so did they. The light that saved convoys also blinded men to their own reflection. Technology's legacy. The partnership of radar and light proved to be more than a battlefield invention. It became the blueprint for modern maritime warfare. Centimetric radar evolved into the post-war search and rescue systems that now guard every shipping lane. The Germans' Schnorchel concept would resurface decades later in Cold War submarines, paired with nuclear propulsion and sonar camouflage. Each side's innovation in those desperate years became the seed of another's survival. Historians call it the Invisible Revolution. The Atlantic War was not only about ships and bombs, it was about perception, the race to see and not be seen. In that struggle, light became intelligence, and silence became defense. Voices of the veterans. At a 1953 reunion in Portsmouth, a former merchant captain, Harold Benton, tells a BBC reporter at night, "When we saw that beam cut the sky, we knew someone was watching over us. We called it the Angel's Torch." A few meters away, a German veteran of U-552 listens quietly, hands clasped. When asked what he felt when the Leigh Light found him, he answers in careful English. It was not hate, only fear, and then relief. Because the waiting was over, the reporter pauses his tape recorder. The two men shake hands, awkwardly at first, then firmly, the memory that glows today. Fragments of that war rest in museums, a corroded radar magnetron, a section of a Leigh Light reflector, a periscope head rusted to green. School children press their faces to the glass, reading captions that compress years of terror into a few lines. But in naval academies, the lessons remain alive. Officers still study the convoy system, the balance between technology and endurance, the interplay of visibility and vulnerability. At dusk over the western approaches, memorial buoys drift with the tide. Each topped with a small beacon, they flash at intervals, white, white. Pause like the blink of an eye remembering. As night falls, one light remains steady. It burns not for conquest, but for understanding that in war, invention without empathy blinds both hunter and hunted. The night once belonged to the wolves. The light reclaimed it for humanity.